Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to the fourth in our series of webinars. In our first webinar, we started off having a look at the economy. We had Dr. Azar Jameen giving us a perspective on the economy. And then as we moved along, we started to look at how do you manage in a crisis and how do you lead in a crisis. And today, we're zooming in on people's personal needs. And let me start off with our normal disclaimer that AfriSam is tackling these webinars as a CSI type initiative where we're trying to make a contribution to society and trying to make sure that we get very skilled, knowledgeable people to share information that would be of use to all of us during these difficult times. And today we're very pleased to have with us award-winning financial journalist and presenter of the popular Money Matters on CNA, Maya Fisher-French. Maya can give you a wave. She's also the editor of Money Pages at City Press and www.Maya on Money website. She recently published her Money Guide, Questions Answered. Maya has a degree in economics and 25 years of experience in the financial industry and as a financial journalist, and providing a deep understanding in the world of money and how it affects our everyday lives. She's got some very interesting stories to tell. It's going to be a very interactive presentation today. We're going to try lots of new things and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm also want to encourage you to stay dialed in until the end because we've got a very special offer. We've got an ebook that Maya has made available to us. So if you dial out before the end, you might lose out. So enjoy, and as usual, you are welcome to post your questions on the side, and I'm going to hand over to Maya now.
Well, thank you, Richard. And the grand plan was to start off with a poll just to see how you're all feeling about finances. And of course, as Richard said, we were trying new things, and I'm not sure if the poll has been updated. So I just wanted to first, before we start, I just want to get a feel for what you guys out there are actually feeling about your finances. So, Richard, have we got that poll updated about whether people have had pay cuts or not? Has that been sorted out?
Let's just have a look, Maya. I'm going to start the poll.
So Richard, whilst you see whether or not we have the poll, really, I think what most people are experiencing right now is it's unusual in that it's a crisis that we're all facing all at the same time. But it's not the first crisis, and it's probably not going to be the last crisis that you're going to experience individually. So whether that's a retrenchment in another time period or something happens to you in your life, it is, to me, this is really a time about financial resilience. It's about really finding the tools now and working through them to say, when this happens again, when I face another crisis, am I going to be better placed? So are we going to be able to do a poll yet? No?
Yes. Which question do you want us to put up?
I just want to kick off with I want to ask everybody whether or not they've experienced a pay cut. So I know if how people's incomes are at the moment. Have we got that poll up?
We've got the one that says, how do you feel about your current debt levels?
Okay, well, we'll worry about that. I'm going to get to that later. So I'm just going to have to just assume that many of you have experienced a pay cut, and that you're probably feeling relatively anxious about your money because you're on this webinar, right? If you were feeling really cozy about your money and you were sitting on a beach somewhere drinking pina coladas, you wouldn't be here. So what I wanted to share with you a very personal story, because I think sometimes coming from a position, I stand here, I'm an expert, I'm on TV, I write books, I've got websites, and you look at me and you think, well, it's easy for you, right? It's easy for you to manage your money. You don't understand what it's like to be me. So I want to tell you my story because I've been here. I had my personal crisis 15 years ago. So 15 years ago, I was working for a newspaper and my husband was working for a company, and we had my second son was born. And of course, like everybody, we'd thought, 2 children, we need a bigger house. So we went off and we bought a bigger house with a bigger mortgage, exorbitant running costs, and we took on this sort of massive pressure. And within a year of my son being born, both my husband and I lost our jobs. So let's put this in context. We bought a new house, we just had a second child, and both of us have lost our jobs, all within the same time period. So this was our financial crisis. This was our Armageddon. And we made a couple of changes. We spoke to some people about how we can, pay off a few bills, and we did all the rest of it. And my husband was fortunate enough to find a job within a couple of months, and I started my freelance career. I decided, right, let me build up a career. But if you ever decide to go freelance, you take about 2 years before, even if you're successful, to reach a point where you're kind of earning the money that you were beforehand. My husband took a new job. The job was a lower salary, but with upside in terms of bonuses. What we didn't do once was adjust our lifestyle. We just kept living as if nothing had changed. So we had pay cuts. I mean, we'd had gaps in income and we'd had pay cuts. And I continued, we carried on. We did all the things that we needed to do. And I remember my husband came home and said, I've got my first bonus. And I was so excited. I was so excited because we bought this new house and we finally had money to put up some curtains, buy a new couch, tear up that dreadful carpet that I hated. I was just elated. And my husband said to me, no, we can't do that. We have to pay off the overdraft. And I kid you not, my answer was, what overdraft? Yes, this is me. Okay, who's talking to you? I didn't know the extent of our debt. I had no idea. Because although we had a joint bank account for our household, it went to my husband. It was pinging on his phone, not my phone. And every time I swiped my card at Woolworths, it went through. So I never questioned it. I had lost complete and utter track of our money. That was a turning point in my life. 15 years ago, I thought this is unacceptable. I will not live like this. I will never, ever again put my head in the sand and pretend that things will just carry on as they are. And we made a lot of changes. We took a lot of steps. We made sacrifices. It took commitment. But we've entered this crisis absolutely okay. We have our 3 months emergency fund. My husband has had to take a pay cut in this COVID lockdown. I'm normally standing in front of people in auditoriums. You can imagine that's not going to be happening for a very long time. Webinars to some degree replace it, but it's not quite the same. So we've had to look at incomes. We've had to do our COVID budget. We created 2 budgets. We did the COVID budget, and then we did the COVID meltdown budget, extending our lower income even further. But we're okay. We actually have money for retirement. We know when we can retire. We know when our bond will be paid off, and we have no other debt. No other debt, because I can tell you one thing that I did then was I made a commitment that I would never have an overdraft facility. If I ever used a credit card, I would pay it off in full and I would have no short-term debt. I mean, mortgages are a little bit different to manage, but I would have no short-term debt. I would never, ever, ever again fund a bank with interest from my earnings. That was my decision at that time. So really what I wanted to do today is to take you through what we did and what really is the foundation for any financial journey, for any getting financial resilience. So Richard, I think you can start the slideshow now. We can just put up the first slide, and then I can take over from there. I found this beautiful quote recently, actually, because I was writing a blog about planting seeds, and this is by Robert Louis Stevenson. He's a poet and author. If some of you may be familiar with his children's book, Treasure Island, but I love this quote. Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. And this resonated with me during COVID and lockdown, because right now, for many of us, the harvests are really poor. They're really, really weak. This has been a bad harvest. But what are we planting for the next season? What are we doing now that will make sure our harvest is better in the future? So as I said, I want to take you through the journey of what we did and the seeds that we planted, so that when we came to the COVID crisis, I didn't have a moment's panic. I can tell you I did not lose a single night's sleep out of money because of the seeds that I planted 15 years ago. And I'm sorry, but it all starts with this. People go, oh no, don't tell me about budget. Don't tell me about looking about how I spend my money. But I'm afraid this is where it starts. It starts with understanding where you spend your money. Okay, we call it a budget, but it's actually a spending plan. I run a competition every year with City Press. It's called Money Makeover. So by the way, if you want to follow it, it's a really amazing program. We take 6 people and we put them through a money journey, a money boot camp. I've been doing this for 4 years, and we get all these applicants who come in, and they have to tell me their budget. They have to tell me what they spend every month as part of their application. Not when we finalize our final 6, and then we go and do their actual budgets. We discover not once, and I kid you, not once in 4 years has anyone ever had their budget accurately done. All of them spent more than they thought they did. And in fact, this year I wrote quite an extensive article about one of our candidates, Peter, who said to me, I don't understand. Why am I in this credit card debt? I can't seem to get out of it. I pay a bit in, I pay this, and this credit card debt just keeps growing and growing. I don't understand why. I'm living on a budget. I'm watching my money. When we did a proper budget for him, and a proper budget is going and taking 3 months of expenditure, 3 months of bank statements, store cards, credit cards, and actually capturing them and actually understanding where your money went. He was spending 5,000 Rand more a month than he earned. It's that simple. He did not know that. He did not know that he was spending 5,000 Rand more than he earned every month because the credit card protected him from knowing that. Just like my overdraft had protected me from the reality of our situation. And that is the truth. So the first thing you're going to do in planting your seeds is to, I suppose, really prepare the ground. And preparing the ground is going and doing a proper budget, not the thumbsuck one, the proper budget. Find out, and when you do it, I want you to take your bank statements and all your spending from January, February, March, not COVID, because COVID lockdown is a great example of what we could live on. So many of you may find, like I found, to be honest, at the end of the month, I had more money because I wasn't spending money on the impulse shopping and the eating out and all the luxuries because government told me I could only buy essential items. It was like, they were like the financial advisor. They said, you may not spend anything except on essential items. But I want you to do that. Go back to January. And this is an example of a household budget. These are the kinds of things that you need to include in it. And you have your fixed expenses. So those are things that are quite difficult to negotiate immediately. Those are fairly fixed. You can go back and do things like reviewing your insurances and all the rest of it, but that's pretty much fixed. You have your variable expenses, and those are things that on a day-to-day basis you can monitor. Oh, electricity. I don't know about you guys, but I tell you, lockdown with 2 teenage boys at home, I don't know what our electricity bill and our grocery bill has gone up significantly. But those are things that you can monitor. You can shout at them every 5 minutes to switch the lights off. And obviously fuel, under lockdown, we've spent a lot less money on fuel, but go look, what were you spending on petrol and all your family items. And the third column you'll see there is personal. So for me, in my household, my husband and I have a household budget that the fixed and variable expenses come out of, but I also have my personal budget. This is the money that I use for myself, that I don't feel like necessarily sharing with my husband, as long as I can afford it. Remember, this spending doesn't come from a credit card. This spending comes from my salary. So I make sure that, if there is money, I have some idea of what I want to spend on myself. And I'm just going to mention one thing. You'll see a little star there where I've put financial commitment to family. And this is something that I see as a really big theme that comes through, especially we see it in Money Makeover, and we're seeing it a lot with COVID as well, is that for many salaried earners, they have other family commitments as well. They may be supporting parents or siblings or just extended family. And what we do, especially in Money Makeover, is we make sure it's part of your budget. Rather than just being an ATM, just handing out cash when you're asked, you say, okay, this is my budget. This is what I can commit to my family obligations every month. And have that conversation with your family so that they're aware of say, I have a budget. This is what I have. And this is what I'm prepared to commit to you. But you in turn have to live on a budget. You in turn have to make sure that the money that I'm giving you is allocated correctly and used correctly. I'm not an ATM. And last year when we worked with Samcare, she was a 26-year-old woman, and the family commitments had literally got her into incredible debt because she just couldn't say no. Once she set this up and she had it in her budget, she said the family would come and ask for extra this and extra that. And she said it took 3 months for them to learn that no meant no. Because if she didn't get herself back on her feet, she would be of no use to them in the future. And I also, though, think it's very important for you to have an emergency fund as well. A part of your emergency fund, which I'll talk about later, should also be taking into account some of those family, perhaps emergencies that may arise. Maybe you've got parents and you suddenly are asked to help with the hospital bills. But it's very important to include that in your budget and make it part of your budget system. Then, just to give you an idea, I mean, I personally so what we did is we started off using, in creating the budget, we used a personal monthly budget Excel spreadsheet off Microsoft. That's where we got it. And I just do have to tell you that I'm very glad that wine is back on the market, because I remember when we did that budget, the first 5 times, the first 5 months at least, I needed a glass of wine every time, because somehow what we owed and what we were spending, we just had to keep cutting and cutting and cutting. And that is really, really not easy to do. And one of the ways we did that was the envelope system. I'd read about it and we applied it. And this is where we moved away. Remember, I had got into this very bad habit of swiping a card. And I wanted to be back in contact with my money. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to know where it was going. So I would calculate the budget for the month and then divide that into weeks. So we would know that week we would be spending this amount on groceries, on petrol. As you can see, I had put wine on there. Whatever it was, we would allocate amount and we would actually draw cash and put it into those envelopes. And that got us the discipline of not just going to the shops and using the card. And we did that for a couple of months just to get back into the habit and discipline of sticking to our finances. And, there were times, I actually remember once where we ran out of grocery money a couple of days before the end of the month. And I remember opening that tin of baked beans. It's actually true. We always talk about living on baked beans, and I remember laughing. And I think the best part was that my husband and I laughed together. We knew we were on this journey together, and we knew why we were doing it. We knew that we were getting out of debt and we were going to get on top of our finances. And the other thing I always would phone my sister sometimes and say, oh, it would be so nice to see you. Could we come for dinner? Just at the really right time. So, but the envelope system really, really helped us until we were kind of back on track and felt that we were managing our money and had got our debt under control. So I think that's a really great tip if you're feeling, Maya, I hear you, but I'm an impulse shopper or whatever it is. So part of it is also putting the cards away for a while and just focusing on going back to cash. Then we had to make phone calls. This actually is something I must say that we did initially. This was right in the beginning when we lost our jobs. We made a lot of phone calls. It was very hard to pick up the phone and tell someone that you couldn't pay your bills. It's really hard. And I can understand why some people don't want to even make that call. But it was amazing. So one of the big bills that we had is we just had my son, and we still had doctors and hospital bills that were outstanding. Pathology, I don't know. Pathology, blood tests, they are so expensive. And I asked them all if I could pay it off over 6 months. And every single one of them, all those people who I owed money to, all of them were so grateful that I'd picked up the phone and made a contact, rather than this massive cost of getting in debt collectors and all of these things. So what I can really, really advise to you is don't put your head in the sand. Pick up the phone, especially now. Everyone knows people are in trouble. They're expecting the phone call. There is no dishonor in picking up the phone and asking for help. This could apply to school fees. Maybe you're struggling to meet school fees. If your child's been at the school for many years, the school's not going to turn you away. They know that you need help, but they also need you to talk to them. Maybe you can pay only 50% of the school fees, but you're prepared to pay something. Have that conversation. Your landlord, if you're renting, a lot of landlords are looking at mechanisms to be able, they may use your deposit as a month's rent, or you can only pay 50%, so they'll use that deposit for 2 months to cover. Make those calls. And somebody also asked me about medical aids, for example. So I know medical aids have been a little tricky. but you really don't want to be losing your medical aid cover right now. So still pick up the phone to the medical aid. And medical aid cannot give you a premium waiver. The reason for that, by the way, is that we all think medical aids make a lot of money. It's actually administrators who make the money. That fund, the medical scheme fund itself, balances out. They pay out on average in the industry 97% of what they collect in premiums. So the healthcare funding premium, which makes up about 90% of your premium, that goes into the fund that pays claims. 97% of that is paid out every year in claims. And you can imagine right now with COVID and all the claims that are coming in, they're just not in a position to offer premium holidays. However, they can look at you on an individual basis. They can change your plan structure if you need to, but at least even if you're just downgrading a little bit, speak to your medical scheme, look at what your options are. And this is very important. I mean, this carries on about not letting your debit orders bounce. So one of the problems that we saw, in fact, I was speaking to the banks, and by the end of April, they hadn't had a lot of bounced debit orders coming through. So remember, a bank's not just seeing the debit orders bouncing from credit, they're seeing it for all of the things, the insurance policies, all of those things. And they said that by the end of April, they hadn't seen it, but by the end of May, it had started to pick up. And by the end of this month, they're expecting quite a dramatic hike in bounced debit orders as people have just run out of money. It is a very bad idea just to leave your debit orders because you are nailed. I don't know if any of you have ever bounced a debit order and been charged anywhere from $50 to $100 by your bank, depending on what package you're on. Then your provider could actually charge you a penalty fee, like Telkom, for example, charge you quite a whack as a penalty fee for missing that payment. So again, pick up the phone, speak to the telecoms, your cell phone providers, come to an arrangement so you're not just letting things bounce. In terms of your credit providers, even if you haven't been, I'm going to talk a little bit about retrenchment later, but even if you haven't been retrenched, you've had a loss of income, perhaps you haven't earned for a month, you will have something like, you could ask about your credit insurance policy. Just a note, if you're a Capitec or African Bank customer, they would even take a partial loss of income as a claim for credit insurance. And credit insurance pays out your monthly loan installments until your income is returned. You could take the COVID payment, debt payment holiday. I think many of you may have already taken that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. You can also talk to them about restructuring your loan. You can extend the period of the loan to be able to lower the loan repayments. And then in worst case scenario, if you're unable to make your payments, you can look at debt counseling. I'm going to talk to that a little bit later. The other very important one is please speak to your insurers. I mentioned medical aids, but your life insurance and your short-term insurance, do not cancel your car insurance. I have had 2 emails literally in the last week from readers who did that, and both of them were in car accidents. And they do not have the money to pay back the person who they crashed into. And let me tell you something, car insurers come after you. They're not interested. They're not going to pay and say, oh, don't worry. They're going to come after you. And you may have a judgment against you. You may end up having to do repayments for the next 5 years. They're going to come after you. So please don't cancel your insurance policies. First phone, find out if you can at least reduce the cover so that if you crash into someone, they're covered. Have a discussion with them. And then, of course, in terms of investments, you can have a discussion with your company, or if you have a private retirement products or investments, about putting those on hold for a period of time until you're back on your feet. Right, poll time. So unfortunately, I couldn't run the poll asking you how you're feeling about money or if you've taken a pay cut. But Richard, I do know we have the debt repayment holiday question. So the question I want to ask you, if all you guys can just give me an indication of this debt repayment holiday. Remember the bank said you don't have to pay your debt for 3 months under COVID. Could you please let me know, Richard, if we can get it going, if you can let me know, yes, I've taken the debt repayment holiday, or no, I have not taken it, I didn't need it, or I did need it, but I didn't qualify because there were some T's and C's that applied to that debt holiday. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time. I'm going to have my sip of my coffee, keep me warm down here in winter. Right, how is the Great. Can you see the, should we do an end? We'll end the poll there. Let me just see. Oh, very interesting. Okay. A lot of you did. I'm surprised that so many of you did not take the debt holiday. I'm very excited about that. Okay. All right. It looks like everyone's voted. Can you see the, I'm going to push end poll and see if we can see the results. Great. So about a third of you took a debt payment holiday. 2/3 of you didn't take a debt holiday, and some of you didn't qualify for a debt holiday. Okay, very interesting. Excellent. So for those of you who did take the debt holiday, it's extremely important that you catch it up. So I was never particularly in favor of people taking the debt holiday unless they absolutely needed to. And I did a lot of press coverage on this because it wasn't a holiday. It wasn't a holiday that you think, oh, I'm going to not have to pay for 3 months. It was the kind of holiday where you go on an overseas holiday and it costs you a huge amount of money when you get back on your credit card. It's that kind of holiday. So these figures were actually given to me by Nedbank. So this was approved by a bank. It's not just me making up figures. Say, for example, this is on a home loan. So say, for example, you had R1 million mortgage and you're 5 years into the mortgage. So you had 180 months left. That 3-month holiday would effectively, working on an installment of 9,000 odd rand, you would have had nearly 29,000 rand a break for 3 months. But what it actually costs you is 14 months more of repayments, because what they do is they capitalize the interest. So the interest is added to your debt. And of course, interest compounds. So instead of you thinking that you're going to just extend your loan by 3 months, you're extending your loan effectively by 14 months. And the extra interest was going to cost you 106,000 rand. So you were getting a 29,000 rand break, and that break was going to cost you 106,000 rand. Absolutely fine to those of you who took it. That's fine. You may have needed it, and it gave you breathing space when your salary was cut. Absolutely fine. But when you are back on your feet, you have to go and address that 106,000 rand. You've got to find a way of getting those payments back as soon as possible. So in option 1, after 12 months, your salary may be back, things may be better. You listen to Maya, you've done your budget, your money's under control. You could increase your repayments by 5%. So you would maybe increase your payment to 10,100 rand. You would actually pay off your property, your house, even earlier than you would have had you've never taken the payment break. You'd paid off in 175 months. You still would have a little bit of extra interest cost, but negligible, 2,000 rand. Their other option, and this is quite interesting to me, is that after 12 months, you may not have the ability to increase your repayments by 5%, but you commit yourself to increasing your repayments by 1% every single year. You just tell the bank, increase it. You do the calculation yourself. You say, add on an extra 100 rand every year onto my bond. You will actually pay it off within 171 months, and there will be no extra cost to you having taken that payment holiday. So for those of you who've taken that payment holiday, really consider this. When you are back on your feet, when you're able to, really go back and look at that payment holiday and how to catch it up. Now, I've got another poll for you. This is now, of course, the debt story. How do you feel about your current debt levels? Are you comfortable? You well managed? Debt's not really a problem? You're coping, but you'd like to reduce your debt? It's feeling like a little uncomfortable, especially going to COVID. You kind of understood the vulnerability of debt. Or you're in trouble. You really cannot meet your debt repayments at this stage. So I think, what I found is that people kind of thought that they were okay with debt. And we see this a lot with people coming into the money makeover process. There's a period of time that they're comfortable, but then something happens. They don't get the job increase. Their salaries they either lose a job, or they don't get the salary increases they were expecting. They don't get the bonuses they were expecting. And suddenly that debt starts feeling a little bit uncomfortable. But then, of course, there could be people who just feel like they've taken on more debt than they can manage. Okay, so just give me a sense of that whilst I have another sip of coffee. Okay, so we're seeing at the moment most people are coping, would like to reduce their debt. That is a very, that's pretty much what I see a lot of. I tell you, I'm very happy with the, there's the final numbers. I'm very happy that 36% of you feel comfortable and managing your debt. That's very high figure. But
Sorry,
majority of you.
Maya, if I can just interrupt and just remind everyone that we cannot see who's voting in which area. So don't be afraid to be honest about this, because we don't know. We can't see the names. So just to make everyone feel comfortable.
Yes, so if you couldn't meet your debt repayments and just thought Maya was going to single you out, I can't do that. I just see numbers, okay? Okay, so coping, but would like to reduce my debt. That is primarily where most people sit, that I find. The comfortable and well managed is not often where I see people. You're coping, but you want to reduce your debt. It starts off with knowing your debt. So just like we went and I spoke about that budget, that is so important to understand where your money's going every month and understanding and getting a handle on that. You also need now to understand your debt. Where is your debt? Where is it sitting? What kind of debt do you have? So this is a debt spreadsheet, literally draw up on an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to be fancy, and you just start capturing all of your debt. Whatever it's called, I'm picking on Sheeny there. Okay, that's just a store card. You know, your credit card, the name of it, bank loans, car, overdrafts, which I haven't included in there. I just realized that was my big one, the overdraft facility. Make sure it's in there. And then have a look. So the name, the type, and then the type of financing. So I want to talk, there's a balance payment. You can see the other columns. I just want to go through each of these columns and really help you understand why some of this debt is evil. Okay, it's like, do not go. It is like poison. I feel like putting a poison sign on revolving credit. Okay, so revolving credit is probably the most lethal type of credit because it is your credit card, it's your store cards, and it's your overdraft facility. This is where you're given a line of credit just to live off continuously. You put a little bit in and you can take it out. You put it in, you take it out, but there is no, and you'll see at the end, there is no end date. It never ends. And this can lead to an incredible false sense of financial security because you just constantly think there is money available, but it's not your money. It's the bank's money, and you are spending a fortune on interest, an absolute fortune on interest. When you go and start doing this exercise, go look on those statements and add up the interest that you've spent over the last few years on those revolving loans. It will terrify you. And I want to tell a little story actually about my sister. I hope she's not watching. Shouldn't really be telling it publicly, but anyway, I am. So she came to me and she complained. She said her husband plays the lotto and he spends 500 Rand a month on the lotto. Now, I've actually got a video up on my website at the moment about like your chances of winning the lotto and how ridiculously low they are. And she said, he's such an idiot. You know, he's wasting his money on the lotto. And I said to her, you know what? I know your overdraft because she tells me these things. And I said, you're spending that on interest, just interest alone on your overdraft facility. I said, at least he's got, even if it's a small possibility, he's got the chance of winning the lotto. You are simply funding a bank. So that is like really important to understand what is that interest. And how much you're actually spending on it. And revolving credit is really, really dangerous because it just allows you, and I'm going to show you a little just now about the profile of a credit card. It will make you never use a credit card again. Then you've got something like when you take out a traditional term loan, so maybe you go and you borrow money and you pay it back over 5 years. You've got that's it. That to me is, I don't like any short-term debt, but if I had to take out debt, that could be a way to do it because you kind of have an end date. You know when it's going to end. And you know that those term loans often also tend to be purpose-driven. You tend to take out a term loan for a reason. It's not just lifestyle. It's not just that oh, pay groceries. Oh, I like those pair of shoes. It's not that kind of consumption debt. It tends to often be targeted for a specific purpose. And then obviously you have vehicle finance and mortgage bonds. Now in vehicle finance, you'll see I've done like a little balloon. When you look at the balance on your car finance, make sure if you have taken a residual payment, and almost everybody takes a residual payment. I wish I could play my little video that I did last week on this, but we decided not to try and insert videos into this just in case it collapsed the system. Balloon payments are when you go and you want to buy a car and you can't actually afford it, and they say, don't worry, you can put a third of the payment at the end, and that will reduce your monthly installment. It is so dangerous. It lands up costing you so much more, because whilst they put that third at the end, you are paying interest on that third and never settling the debt. So that interest remains high. And then at the end of the period, you suddenly discover you owe 50 or 100,000 Rand and you've forgotten about it. So when you look at that balance of what you owe in your car, make sure if you have a residual or balloon payment, it's included in there, so you understand the total cover of your debt. Obviously, you want to look at your interest rates. It'll give you an idea of which are your more higher interest rate products. All credit has fees. In fact, my fee here is incorrect. It's actually 49 Rand is the minimum or the maximum fee that a credit provider can charge. And let me tell you something, credit providers always charge the maximum. They'll charge you the maximum initiation fees. They'll charge you the maximum service fees. And then there's a column for credit insurance. So I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about credit insurance under the retrenchment thing, but credit insurance became an incredibly valuable insurance now when you are losing your job, because in credit insurance covers you for loss of income and retrenchment, disability and death. So if you are retrenched or lose your income, it actually pays your monthly installments for you until you're able to. If you die, it covers it in full, or disabled. It pays off your whole debt. And some products have them embedded in them. They are already part of the product. You pay for it. Trust me, you pay for it. But it's embedded. And usually you find store cards have it. And some credit cards have it. And a term loan may have it. On some products, it was optional. Some it's built in. What we do find is that traditionally on home loans and car finance, we don't find it as commonly. It tended to be an opt-in product. And amazingly, when you come to borrow money from the bank and they say, do you want an insurance product added to it? Everyone says no. And then they get retrenched and they get cross that they didn't take it. But that is we tend to find them not on home loans and car finance as much. Unless you earned 25,000 Rand or less a month, then on home finance, some of the banks required credit insurance. But simply by looking at your statements, I don't know if you ever have, when you last looked at your debt, your credit statements, check if there is a line item. It's called balance protection or credit insurance. Not to be mixed up with your household insurance or building insurance on your home loan. It'll be specifically called a credit or balance protection, those words. And then obviously have an idea of when this debt comes to an end. And as I said, revolving credit never ends. It's just this ongoing nightmare. So do that. If you're wanting to, you're coping, but you want to reduce your debt, understand what your debt is. Let's get a handle on it and understand what your fees are, your interest rates are, and what that type of debt is. Then you're going to come up with a debt repayment plan. So in this example, I just assumed that you've gone through your budget and you've managed to find an extra 1,000 Rand a month because you've cut back on eating out or fuel, or you found an extra 1,000 Rand. And you have about 50,000 Rand of short-term debt. And what you're going to do is the mistake a lot of people make is they try and pay off. They say, I want to settle my debts, but they pay 200 here, 200 here, a little bit extra everywhere. And then they're not really sure what they're paying off or when it's going to be paid off. And what really works well is something called the snowball method. It was actually a concept coined by a chap called Dave Ramsey. I was fortunate enough to edit his book for South Africa. He's an American guy. And this is really where I got the concept from when I edited his book, is this idea that you target one debt at a time. So it's almost like a domino effect, but you target one debt at a time. And as that debt settles, so you settle the next one. So in this example, maybe you've got a retail store card, 3,000 Rand, you're paying 300 Rand a month, you've got a clothing account, you've got a personal loan, and you've got a credit card. And maybe at the moment you're paying 2,500 Rand into that credit card. So let's just assume you've got some of this sort of short-term, what I call consumer-driven debt, and those are your current monthly repayments. But now you've got this extra 1,000 Rand. So you're meeting those repayments. Those are fine. But you've got this extra 1,000 Rand. What you're going to do is you're going to take your smallest debt first. I like to go with the smallest debt first. People can say, oh, it should be the highest interest or whatever. I like smallest debt because you hit it quickly and it's done. And it's a psychological win. So all of you females on there who have ever tried dieting, you will know that it really helps to kind of lose the first kilogram quickly because it kind of motivates you. Your clothes are feeling a bit looser and it gives you motivation. It's exactly the same thing. You kind of feel, wow, I've paid off a retail store card. I've taken that 1,000 Rand in May. Okay, we should adjust these, but say you started last month, you've settled it. By July, that credit card's closed. I mean, that retail store card's closed. You will feel fantastic, but you will have to cut it up. You will have to get rid of it because if you keep it and then you go back spending again, then what's the point of doing this? But now, so you had 300 Rand, you added 1,000 Rand, you put in 1,300 a month, you settle that credit card, that store card very quickly. And I have to tell you, do you know how many of my followers are currently telling me they've already settled store cards just over COVID because they had that extra 1,000 or 2,000 Rand a month from not spending on other things. Maybe not petrol. If you're saving on your petrol bill at the moment, you could really be targeting this. So at the end of July, you now have this 1,300 Rand that you can add to the store card, that's the clothing store account. So now that clothing store account, you can add to that and you increase it to that 500 Rand that you were paying, you're adding the 1,300, you can now put 1,800 Rand into that store card. You pay it off, it's paid off by November. Then you move to your personal loan. Now your personal loan, instead of paying 650,000, you're able to pay 2,450 Rand to that. You accelerate that repayment, you pay it off. You take that amount and you add it to your credit card payment. You are now paying, I see my image is covering the number, but you're actually paying 4,950 Rand a month into your credit card. And by October the following year, you are now debt-free. But what's also fantastic is don't forget that you have now nearly 5,000 Rand. So yes, a year ago, you started with 1,000 Rand. Now you've got 5,000 Rand in your budget. Think about that. You've settled that debt, which has actually put 5,000 Rand every month of disposable income into your budget, which means that you now have a chance to look at things like saving and investing. So a very powerful way to really find money. And I think I had a question from one of you which said, how do I reduce my debts and spend less on debt so I have more for my living capital? This is how you do it. I found this, by the way. People are always saying to me, where do I get tools? And I am in the middle of actually trying to create a debt repayment tool because I find a lot of the ones in the market are very complicated and they always add on too many things. But I found this again, Excel. Type this onto Excel templates. It's called a credit card payoff calculator. And it's in dollars, but you just obviously use Rand values. And it can actually give you some idea of what you're currently paying and how much quicker you'll pay it off if you pay in a bit extra. It doesn't have the little add-ons like yours, 69 Rand fees that you're paying every month, which will obviously affect the term and it may take you a little longer to pay off. But I think for me, it gives you quite a nice kind of tool to play around. It's free. You can really put some of your debts in there and give yourself a little bit of an idea of how long that's going to take to pay off. So just a nice calculator I found. But what I found with this credit card calculator is the word credit card payoff, because this is not how you pay off a credit card, or this is not the profile of credit card payments. Credit cards, this is why I hate revolving credit. Credit cards work on a repayment based on your outstanding balance. So it currently is around, most banks ask you to only pay 3% of your outstanding balance. So say, for example, you had 20,000 Rand outstanding balance, you would pay 600 Rand a month minimum payment. But as that reduces, and now you only owe 10,000, your minimum payment drops to 300. So it's not a static amount that you pay every single month and your credit card gets paid off quickly. Let me show you what it does. That the fact that a revolving payment loan works on percentage paid back and not absolute value. If you had a credit card balance of 20,000 Rand and you never used it again, you chopped it up and you said, I'm never using it again, but I'm just going to pay that minimum, it would actually take you 25 years to pay it off. 25 years. And the thing is, this is hidden from us by a revolving credit. We never fully understand the implications that because you are only paying 3%, you are barely covering the interest on that. Plus, remember, you've got your credit facility fees of 69 Rand, possibly also credit insurance on top of that. So the chance of you ever really paying this credit card off by paying the minimum amount is negligible. So the best thing I can advise you is never get into this terrible, terrible habit of paying only the minimum on your credit card. Of course, if you're facing financial crisis and you cannot pay in more and you're stabilizing, you're going to have no choice, at least meet your minimum. But if you are coping but would like to reduce your debt, this is the one you need to start targeting. And have a look at that credit card payment profile. That's what the amortization curve looks like on a credit card payment. The blue part is what you spent on your shoes and your clothes and your groceries. The red part is how much you will pay the bank if you just pay that minimum amount. So if you ever wondered, why is the bank so keen to give me a credit card? This is why. I just want to go on to, I see I've been talking for far too long. And I'm eating into your question time. So I just wanted to quickly, for those of you who may not be able to meet your debt repayments, I did have a question on debt consolidation and debt review. Debt counseling, you can consider debt counseling or debt review if you cannot meet your debt repayments. So if you are unable to, you've done the budget, you've looked at it, and you are now over indebted. It can also protect your assets, your car and your house from repossession, but only if you go into debt review before legal action has been taken place. Keep in mind it is court ordered. Once you enter, you cannot exit until your debts are paid off in full. And what I often find is that people go into debt review, they get a salary increase or a promotion, and they say, but I can exit debt review now because I can afford my debts. You can't. The agreement with the court is you will stay in until your debts are repaid. All you can do is escalate your repayments to get out of the debt quicker. And I really want to also say, if you are looking at this, perhaps drop me an email, because you should only be using firms that use the debt counseling rules system. So there's two ways of that debt counselors work. One is they negotiate as part of the DCRS system, they negotiate with your creditors to reduce your interest rate. So you could see your credit card reduced from 20% down to 2%. And through that way, they're able to get you out of debt quicker. Other firms simply extend the period of time. They simply take your debt and they make you pay it off over 7 years, and the interest costs are massive. So very important you choose a firm that actually is going to negotiate on your behalf for lower interest rates. And please don't confuse debt consolidation with debt counseling. Debt consolidation is when you take a single loan and you use that and you pay off all your smaller loans and you shut all of those down and you're only paying one payment. But that's you going and getting a loan from a bank, and that is the relationship you have with the bank. It's not court ordered. Many debt counselors and debt review people say, well, why don't you consolidate your debts? This is not consolidating. Well, I suppose in a sense it is, because it's a single payment that will pay all of the outstanding amount, but it is court ordered and it's very different from debt consolidation. In terms of the hierarchy as well, another question I get is building an emergency fund. I mean, when do I pay off debt and when do I put my money into investing? I think the key thing for me is always to start with an emergency fund. An emergency fund is the thing that protects us during the crises. So I reached, 15 years ago, I had my experience. It took me a couple of years, I must be honest, to build up 3 months of my salary, which is what you'll need to do for your emergency fund. But at least start with 15,000 Rand. Make sure that you have some money before you start accelerating debt, before you start coping with debt. Make sure you have some money for those short-term emergencies that will keep making you go back to your credit card. Very important. I would make that my first step. Yes, your goal is a 3 months expenses, but start at least with 15,000 Rand. And then if you get bonuses, if you get a tax rebate, use that to build up your emergency fund. Then you can start looking at starting to pay off your debts. Also, start investing. I'm talking about a tax-free investments here, another whole webinar on itself. But even if it's just 200 Rand a month, start putting a little bit away for the long term. Also, look at your retirement. Do an assessment. Are you on track for retirement? Maybe you're not now, but can you commit future salary increases? Maybe, if currently you're contributing 10% of your income to your retirement fund, every year, could you increase that by 1%? Next year, it's 11%, then 12%. Just start looking at ways to improve your retirement, and then look at paying off your mortgage quicker. A lot of people focus only on getting rid of that mortgage debt, and they're not doing the other stuff, and they get to retirement and they find that, yes, their house is paid off, but they have no money to buy food or to actually pay for and provide them an income in retirement. I just want to move now, Richard. I'm moving through a little quicker. Can we just move to the poll on retrenchment? Because I think this is quite a big one. We're seeing already a lot of people that retrenchments are starting. EdCon came out, 22,000 people being retrenched. It's absolutely awful. So just give me a sense. Do you think that you or your partner, so within your family unit, within your household, is there a chance of retrenchment this year? Phew. Okay, I see the numbers are still moving, but definitely retrenchments are a big fear. Okay. All right. Are we near? Has everyone voted? Yeah, retrenchments. Phew. Okay. That's the poll. Has it been up? Is the poll up? So this is, of course, so many of you who feel like you're managing your debts, things are okay. This is the worry. This is the worry. I mean, the majority of you are worrying that you're going to be retrenched. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just before, I am eating into a Q&A time. Perhaps we can go over. But I really feel this is important because preparing for retrenchment is extremely important and looking at your options. So if you face retrenchment, you need, first of all, that budget we spoke about, even more important, right? That budget that I spoke about, please go and do it. You need to know what it costs you to live. And you can even say, like I spoke about, my husband and I, we did a COVID budget and then we did a COVID meltdown budget. What are those budgets? What is it that we could actually still give up even more, cut even more if we needed to? Find out what your survival budget is and say, if I was retrenched, this is kind of what I would need still to live on in order to put food on the table. Then in terms of your severance package, so there are two elements to a retrenchment. One is your actual severance package, which is based on number of years of service. So if you've worked, I think it's 1 week for every year, there's actually guided by the Employment Act. Your employer could offer you a sweetener to take voluntary retrenchment because they're wrapping things up quicker. So that's that part. But you can also access your pension or provident fund as well as part of that. It's the one time that you can actually access that if you need it. Together, you can get 500,000 Rand tax-free. You don't have to pay tax on it. I want you to keep in mind that this is a one-off, this 500,000. So if you've utilized it before, if you changed jobs before and you drew down on your pension, or if you retrenched before and you drew down and used that 500,000, you won't be able to use it now. In the future, if you use it now, you will not be available. And on retirement, it is no longer available. So when you retire, normally you get 500,000 Rand tax-free at that time. It will not be available because you've used it. So understand the consequences of using that, drawing down on your pension fund from a tax perspective. Yes, you can take down some of it tax-free. It will have a consequence later. You also need to I'm going to go and talk a little bit about UIF. I'm not going to talk about it now. But you also cannot access your retirement annuity. So yes, you can access your pension or provident fund with your company, but you may not access a retirement annuity if you have taken that out separately. That you have to wait till the age of 55. You cannot draw on that before then. And the other advice I really want to give you is don't rush to take this lump sum and settle all your debts. So a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it in my home loan, or I'm going to pay off my car, and then I just don't have to worry about that debt anymore. Now, yes, in a wonderful world, if money fell from heaven and I was able to pay off my debts, I would do that. But this money is cash flow. This money you need to put food on the table. So rather use the money and pay off your debts as per your normal debt repayments, and keep that money so that you know that you can meet your budget every month, which includes those monthly repayments. Okay, so don't go and just dump it in there and then wonder next month, oh, how am I going to live? How am I going to buy electricity? Just on UIF, this is something you may want to start thinking about. UIF, you get credits. You get a credit for every 4 days of employment, and you reach maximum credits after 4 years of consecutive payment, or 4 years of payment to UIF, and that will give you obviously your maximum credits. How much you receive from UIF is on a sliding scale. So the lower earners tend to have a higher percentage of their UIF, of their income paid out. Higher income earners would receive a lower percentage. So it's on a sliding scale. The maximum you can possibly get is just under 15,000 Rand. So if you're on a 60,000 Rand salary, that's the most you're going to be getting out of UIF, and that's assuming that you contributed for four years prior. So just important to also go check your UIF, make sure that you're registered for UIF. A lot of people discovered they weren't when COVID happened. Just a really important one to keep in mind. Also, I've spoken about credit insurance earlier, but this is where credit insurance really comes into its own. So I want you to also now, if you're worrying about retrenchment, go check everything. Go check all your policies, everything. And find out what cover you have. So find out which loans have credit insurance, because credit insurance will pay your debt installments for you until you find work. Keep in mind that there is a 90-day waiting period. So you can't go and take credit insurance out today with the expectation that you're going to be retrenched in the next 3 months, because they won't cover you. So unfortunately, it's a bit late if you don't have it already. But go find out, start getting the paperwork ready. Just start having that conversation within your family about how you're going to manage this process if it happens. And also don't please start falling behind your debt repayments, because they are linked to your credit insurance in many cases. So what happened was that people came into COVID and they'd missed a couple of debt repayments, and they wanted to claim credit insurance, and their credit insurance had lapsed, because their credit insurance is part of the payment that they made on their debt. Very important. Start talking to the banks. Your home loan, you could have taken the debt repayment holiday, but you can also speak to your bank if you've been retrenched to say, could I reduce my repayments for a period of time? Maybe I can pay 50%. I've done my budget. Here's my budget. This is what I'm getting from UIF, my severance package. I can only afford to pay 50% of my home loan. Most banks will give you 6 months, even up to a year, of those lower repayments, keeping in mind that any extension will cost you in the long run. I've already explained to you just what a 3-month debt payment holiday costs you, but if you need to do it, you need to do it. The final real one that you could do is restructure your home loan over 30 years. I wouldn't advise you to rush into this unless you have some really long-term retrenchment needs. I would rather first try and just do a reduction on my bond repayments rather than restructuring debt, because it gets incredibly expensive the longer you take to pay it off. Car finance, again, the COVID debt relief could apply, but you need to speak to your bank, because home loans, banks want to keep people in their houses. They don't want to own your house and try and sell it. They're not interested in that, and it's not good PR for them to kick people out of houses. So they're a lot more negotiable on your home loan. They are very unnegotiable on car finance, and that is because cars depreciate monthly. Every single month, your car is worth less and less and less. So the longer before they repossess it, the more they're going to lose on trying to settle the debt. They act very quickly on car finance. So you need to be speaking to them and coming up with an arrangement before you start missing payments. And I think part of that is you also need to be realistic. As a family, maybe you're a 2-car family. Do you still need 2 cars? Does it make sense to perhaps sell one of your cars and have those discussions? And one thing I need to make clear, and I get this, funny enough, this question quite frequently, and that is, can I just give the car back to the bank? No, You cannot give. In theory, legally, yes, there is a clause that allows you to give the car back to the bank, but it doesn't settle your debt. All the bank does is they take it, they stick it on an auction floor, they auction it, flog it, and come back and say, well, here's the shortfall. You owed 200,000 on your car, we've got 50. You owe us 150,000 Rand. You owe the money on your car, whatever that is. So you can't just go and give the keys back. And generally speaking, if you're going to sell your car, go do it privately. Don't try and sell it through the bank or through an auction. And just to end off, I spoke about it earlier when I said with retrenchment, go through your paperwork. For all of you, whether you're worrying about this retrenchment or not retrenchment, please, this is also an incredibly important time to start getting all your documents together. Put a file together. This is the time to take action, to sow the seeds for the harvest, to make sure you're on top of your money. Put everything together. Do you have a file that has all your retirement documents, your investment policies, your short-term insurance policies, and read them? Read the fine print. Is there things that you in there that you need to know about? One thing I forgot to mention under retrenchment is some insurance policies have premium waivers if you've been retrenched. Your life cover could have a premium waiver if you've been retrenched. Your retirement annuity could have, and some short-term insurance policies have a premium waiver up to 6 months if you've been retrenched. Go find out. Start reading the fine print. Very, very important. And I just wanted to mention a final story about myself. When I eventually got around to doing this, I was putting all my paperwork together, and I came across a statement from a preservation fund. So I had left a job when I was in my 20s, and I had put the money into a preservation fund, and I had actually forgotten about it. Clean forgotten. I'd moved houses a few times, moved provinces, and I came across this piece of paper, and I phoned them, and it was worth 120,000 Rand. I think I put in about 30,000, and it was worth 120,000 Rand. So maybe when you're going through these documents, you'll actually find something that can boost your finances. So that's kind of my advice for you. I have gone over time a little bit, but I think hopefully, Richard, we've got time for questions.
Yes, thanks, Maya. Let me just switch the presentation off. Okay, thanks for a great presentation. Very lively, very interactive. Normally, when you have good presenters like these, you actually don't feel the time, because I haven't seen anybody dial off. In fact, the numbers have kept going up. So it's a great indication that people really enjoyed the presentation, and some of the comments on the side that I've been getting, some very good comments, and so great. So we've got a couple of questions. So what I'm going to do, because this deals with private finance, normally I would mention the person's name and then raise the question. I'm not going to do that today, so that if you still want to ask some questions, feel free to do that. I won't mention your name because it is about personal finance. So let's start with the first question. It says, what are your views on retirement annuities versus unit trusts, like investments? Leaving it to government to drip funds at a later stage seems crazy. Is property still a good idea?
All of that is one question.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to just quickly, so there's a big debate between, do I actually invest in a retirement annuity or do I just invest in a normal investment? And one of the debates also becomes between, do I invest in a tax-free savings account or retirement annuity? So I have both, but I'm self-employed. So I don't have a pension fund. Okay, I don't have, that is my pension fund. And I think it really depends on your own personal circumstances. So say, for example, you are you're with a company, you have a provident fund. Then for me, the first step would really be maximizing my tax-free savings account. As I said, Richard, we can do another whole webinar on how those work. We focus here more on feeding the pinch. But they allow you 36,000 Rand a year you can contribute, and any growth on that, any capital growth and any dividend income or interest income is tax-free. Now that is absolutely critical, because capital gains tax is actually quite significant. And over a period of time, if you're investing for 10, 20 years, you're going to get quite a big capital gains tax bill when you come to sell that investment. So for me, I always feel that the first 3,000 Rand a month, because that's what it would be per month, I want to make sure it goes into a tax-free savings account. The retirement annuity is massively beneficial. There's a couple of things that retirement annuities do for you that a tax-free savings account doesn't do. Firstly, it gives me a deduction from my income. So that's the only deduction really I can get. It's the same as with your provident fund or your pension fund. You can deduct up to 27.5% for retirement funding from your salary. And that can be that allows you to actually allow SARS to fund your retirement quite significantly. So it's a really important one. Then the other thing is an RA is protected from creditors. No creditor can go after your RA. It also doesn't form part of your estate on death. So the taxes that apply to your RA are based on retirement, on the retirement tables. So a lot of people actually use it as a planning tool to reduce their estate duty tax. So there's a lot of, you do need to look at it in your own personal circumstances where an RA fits in. But I would say if you've got a company pension fund and you're getting that some tax deduction, start first with a tax-free savings account, which over time will give you an additional capital. So at retirement, what's great about a tax-free savings account is you can draw the whole thing at retirement without paying tax. Where a retirement annuity, 2/3 has to be used to purchase an annuity. You can take 1/3, of which 500,000 is not taxable, but you can take 1/3, but 2/3 will be you have to use to purchase an annuity, and that annuity income is taxed. So there's this kind of, yes, we give you the tax break now, but we will take tax later. So I like the blend of having some retirement funding that's going to give me my annuity income, but then also having a tax-free savings account. People are concerned, Richard, and I think that was a little bit where that question alluded to it, is what is the government going to do about retirement funds? Because that came up as one of the questions I had before the session. I did do actually an interview on it. I honestly don't believe that we're going to have prescribed assets in South Africa to the extent that government is going to force pensions to invest in underperforming assets like SAA or Eskom. I think that there is enough legal precedence, constitutional protection, that they would find that very, very difficult to do. And I don't think there is actually a desire to do it. I think they mix up concepts. And one of them is that infrastructure is an amazing opportunity for pension funds to invest in. But it should be infrastructure developments that are going to benefit the economy and give a good return, or at least an above inflation return to pensioners. And government and private sector are working together on a lot of infrastructure projects. I think it's about 2 trillion rands worth that have been identified. And it makes a lot of sense for pension funds to invest in those as long as the returns are market related. So, and the principal officer or the investment team of that pension fund gets to choose whether or not they do it. They're not forced to do it. So I think that's the debate, just to do that. And on property is, I'm not a lover of property. My sister invests a lot in property. So property for me is more about, do you understand property? Are you prepared to put the work into property? I don't like property. It has high holding costs. I've got a family member who's trying to sell a property at the moment rather urgently. They're basically being offered half of probably what they thought it was worth. And yet they're having to hold on the holding costs. You can have situations where tenants don't pay. So you need to have quite a bit of capital put aside for property. Yes, there's leveraging. You put down a deposit and the tenant pays off the interest, but you need to do your homework properly. But I do have a lot of that content on my website if you want to do more. But I think enter property with your eyes open. Don't just think it's an easy investment. Next one.
Yeah, a popular question, I suppose you get this question asked by a lot of people, is it a good idea to consolidate all your debt into your home loan?
Yes, it's a very good question. Absolutely, if you do it properly. So right now, your home loan, I can't even keep up. They've cut rates so many times. I think it's 7% if you're at prime. Which is what's crazy is right now you can go deposit money at African Bank and get 10%, and you're only paying 7%. It's like an arbitrage opportunity. Our rates have really come down significantly on home loans. The mistake people make, so say, for example, you want to put your car finance into there. If you want to do your car finance through your home loan, you need to go and make sure that you increase your repayments, your bond repayments, by the difference to what you would have paid on that car finance. So say, for example, that car would have cost you 5,000 Rand a month to finance. Add that 5,000 Rand to your bond repayments. Then it makes sense, because then you're still paying the car off over the 5 years and you're saving some interest, because the car may be at 12% and your bond's at 7%. But the mistake so many people make, and I promise you, I see it over and over, is they do the debt consolidation with the belief and expectation that they will increase the bond. But then this happens, and then they want to do that, and I don't have the money this month, and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly the short-term debt has become the most expensive long-term debt you have ever had in your life. So I think that's my answer. Done properly, yes. Do you have the discipline to do it properly is the question.
Yeah. Another popular one, I suppose, is relates to car finance. And the question here is, can a person renegotiate the balloon payment at the end of the period and say, for example, can I get 4 months to pay off the balloon payment when it's due?
Yes, absolutely. 65% of people renegotiate the balloon payment at the end of the period, which is, yes, I can't tell you to undo your balloon payment because it's too late. Next car, please don't get one. But effectively, you'll end up financing your car over about 10 years if you actually renegotiate your balloon payment. But yes, so what I would suggest is, if you're coming up to that balloon payment now and you've made no reserves, then do that, and renegotiate and come up with a term loan that settles it. Otherwise, if you know it's coming up in the next year or so, start saving for it. Start putting some money away so that you can at least settle it. The other option is, but it seems a little tricky depending on who you financed it, is you could pay an extra now towards the balloon payment, but you actually have to tell the finance house, the bank, that's you want it allocated to the balloon payment. And I'm not always sure that mechanism works that well. So I would say probably the best thing to do is just to start saving for it as well.
Yeah. And here's an interesting one. With the new normal and people practicing a lot of social distancing, a lot of people have started to do online shopping. And somebody here is asking for some tips and advice on how to control the spend and not let your credit card run away with you with online shopping. Okay.
So hear you. I promise you. I think we kept take a lot but I kind of thought about it as I was helping all the couriers or something. So I know what you're saying. And the best tip that I ever got, I wonder if I've got it on my bookshelf here, The Behavior Gap. Let me just see if we can, John, if you see The Behavior Gap there. It's a great book to read. But the author of it, I know quite well. And he gave me the best advice ever for online shopping. And he said, put it in your cart and don't give yourself 72 hours to purchase. So it's like a delayed thing. Put it in your cart. And he said, because he has an issue as well with books. He says he keeps buying too many books. So he puts them in the cart, and then 3 days later, he comes back and decides whether he still wants it. So what I've discovered with that technique is that often the Take-A-Lot or whoever it is comes back to you and offers you that good at a lower price, because it's been sitting in your cart. So it can actually work out as quite a good strategy to even drop the price. So that was probably the best advice that I've had. And this is Carl. So he wrote The Behavior Gap. I think it's looking backwards in your, but he also illustrated my book. So those people are going to get my book at the end. He did illustrate my book, but he was the one who gave me that tip. And I just thought that was a good one. And you know what also I really suggest you do is just tick yourself from all the newsletters, the one day only specials. Okay, all those newsletters that you get in your inbox every morning, just unsubscribe, because the temptation will be too great. But also maybe set yourself a budget and say, I'm allowed to spend X amount every month on online shopping, and try and commit to it.
Great. I'm sure you saw all the books behind me. So I'm also one of those that does a lot of online shopping for books. Here's another interesting one. This gentleman wants to know, is there a website that can guide you on identifying the best bank that you can choose to meet your specific banking needs? Now, that's a question I haven't heard, but it's an interesting one.
The best bank to meet your banking needs. Yeah. So if you stay on till the end of the webinar and you get my book, I've got a chapter on that. So, it's a very good question. And there's a big debate about what, bank fees and all that sort of thing. And I think you've got to decide what is it that you want from your bank. So we have some of the new players coming in that are coming in incredibly well priced. Like my kid's got Time Bank. He's got a Time Bank account because it's so cheap. But he doesn't need a lot of the operational things that I perhaps need. So it is about how much what you're going to need, what you're going to use it for. You've got a player like Capitec that's come in and really shook things up a lot. But then the other banks have followed. So FNB's got a product that's quite similar to Capitec. Their easy banking products are actually quite similar to Capitec's pricing. I think you need to say, one of the key things that I would look at if I was wanting to develop a relationship with the bank, and this is important, is actually the future home loans, car finance. Because if you don't want to go and ratchet up store cards and God knows what else to get your credit record, a lot of it is going to be your banking behavior. So if you're with a bank that can offer you a home loan, then you would probably want to have and this is, I know Capitec will be upset with this because they don't offer home loans, but it would be a really good idea to develop a banking behavior so that they can look and say, this is somebody who never bounced debit orders. They always had a little bit of cash left at the end of the month, or they put some money away every month into a 7-day deposit. They manage their money well. Those things can be considered as part of your application. So that's an important point. The other one is reward systems. Like, some people are reward junkies and they work these reward systems incredibly well. I just don't have the energy for it. But I tell you, people write to me and they do this. And if you go to clicks and you swipe your FNB plus your multiply plus your discount plus, I don't know, it's like you get like this. And so if you are a rewards junkie, then you also look at the bank and see how it integrates with some of the other reward programs. But really, really important is to be on the right package. So I've come across a lot of people who are wasting bank fees because they are on the wrong package. They don't need all the bells and whistles. Make sure that your banking behavior matches your fees. That was probably and don't go into a branch. Branches are evil. They charge you a fortune to put your toe into a branch. That's the other way to save banking fees.
Good. I see we've got quite a few more questions. I'm going to suggest to the other people who've also asked quite a few questions, we will make Maya's web details available that you can log on. I think you do offer that service. Is that correct, Maya?
Sure.
Where people can log on to your...
I'm inundated by, I have many channels. So at Maya on Money. So you're more than welcome to drop me an email as well.
Okay, so we'll make Maya's email details available to all of you. But let's just take the final question here. It says, I'm looking at investing about R1 million at African Bank to get a return of about 10.5%. Should I take out a further 500,000 from my excess bond at 7% interest and invest it for 60 months in African Bank?
No. So, yeah, I wouldn't do that. I was making a joke earlier, but the reason I wouldn't do it is we don't know what interest rates are going to do. So interest rates could suddenly climb up again. Remember, they've cut interest rates for an emergency. If the economy recovers, those rates could go back up again, and you're missing out on that opportunity. I would separate those things. Don't use that arbitrage opportunity at the moment. And also, the other thing is you don't know what life's going to throw at you. You've locked your money away for 60 months and increased your debt. That wouldn't be, to me, a sound strategy. Don't always look for clever ways to make money. Sometimes it's the simple stuff and just sticking to the basics that work. Okay,
one last bit of advice. We'll take this last one and I'll end on a high note. So if you had $1 million right now, where would you invest it? What would be your best advice?
So if I had, I would, first of all, I would probably definitely partly look at my debt. So my home loan, I definitely want to put some dent into there. I'm going to sound incredibly unpatriotic, but you definitely need some offshore assets right now. So I think what we saw over the last 4 years has really been that South Africa's economy is weak. The rand has been weak, and I'm really hoping that things will change and it'll be great. But if you have a pension fund, they cannot invest more than 70%, more than 30% outside of South Africa. So you're going to naturally have less local assets, less offshore assets. So I would probably start looking at some sort of diversified offshore investment. But that is not financial advice, and please seek a financial advisor.
Thanks, Maya. So thank you very much for availing yourself to share this most valued information that I'm sure many people right now are really having to confront with personal issues around finance. And I think you've covered a lot of very valuable topics that can at least help people make some sound decisions in terms of their personal finance. I know many of our staff have also dialed in. So for all the AfriSam staff that have dialed in, thanks for dialing in. I trust you found this webinar very useful. Before you all dial out, I just need to remind you, I need to post some information which you can download. There's some links as well. We also have Maya's ebook vouchers. Please look out for the code to use on the ebook vouchers. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 100 of these ebooks were made available. So if I look at it, a significant number of you will be able to get an ebook. So that's good. But once again, Maya, thanks so much for the work that you do out there and for providing this valued advice for our people. I know it's not easy times right now, and I'm sure many people would still want to ask you lots more questions. So we will certainly post your details so people can interact with you directly. On behalf of AfriSam, once again, thanks so much for your time. And just to remind everyone, our final webinar is going to be on Tuesday, the 21st of July, same time. And we will end off on a slightly different note. We're going to have Vusi Tembakwaya. I'm sure some of you know Vusi. Vusi is a venture capitalist. He's a renowned global speaker and an author and a business mogul. He has successfully built and transformed businesses across Africa. He's also a motivational speaker. So we're also trying to keep the spirits up in these difficult times and trying to just encourage people and pump you up a little bit and not just have you sitting there and trying to cut your wrist because things are really tough. So please make a note of this in your diaries. Last webinar in the series is on the 21st of July. Thank you all for dialing in. I'm still going to stay on for a while as I download all the stuff for you and make all the offers available. But Maya, you're welcome to dial out, and thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'm off to go and have my cup of coffee, my other cup of coffee now.
Cheers.